Welcome all. Welcome to CBS. We hope you'll have a good time here. Welcome to the ECGI Conference on Corporate Purpose, hosted by the Center for Corporate Governance at CBS, where we're also interested in corporate purpose, so we will be following this with enthusiasm. I believe the purpose today of this very conference is to take stock of corporate purpose and where we are in the debate and promising avenues for taking the field forward. I should almost say taking the course forward. So basically, I'm sure Colin is going to say something about that in just a moment, but I'll say a few practical remarks. This event is being recorded by ECGI. If you do not wish to be recorded, the best we can do for you is avoid the cameras. If you haven't filled out the consent form, you should do so. It's out there. And the organizers really love it if you do it. The format will be 5 sessions for an hour, and we will deal with management, ownership, finance, law, and accounting in due order. And there will be some time for questions, we hope, for each session. And then, so the format will be that you actually get mic'd up here, So basically, you can speak so that everybody can hear what you say. But don't start speaking before you have your mic, right? That's the to say. And personal items, keep them with you. You can utilize the coat racks and so on. And you can also place your large luggage there. It's reasonably safe. The Wi-Fi you can find on the tables here, the logins and all that. So I think that's pretty much it from my side. Please take it away, Colin.
Okay, thanks very much indeed, Steen, and good morning, welcome. Thank you very much indeed for being here today. I think it's going to be a very interesting day and hopefully a very informative day, because one of the hottest topics of discussion these days in business schools, finance, corporate law, and accounting is corporate purpose. It's a hot topic because it's a disputed topic. Some see it as the key to the foundation of business, the resolution of mounting problems, and the source of corporate success. Others see it as old as the hills and irrelevance and nothing more than branding and corporate promotion. So really what we're trying to do today is to get to the heart of this issue. Is corporate purpose foundational or fictional? And this is possibly a unique opportunity to get to the heart of this for several reasons. First, the conference addresses all of the key aspects we think of corporate purpose, namely ownership, business practice, finance, law, and measurement. Second, it's not just about business talking to business, lawyers to lawyers, academics to academics. It's everyone in conversation with everyone else. Third, it's attracted a remarkable group of people, namely you. It brings together people who are doing it as well as those who are thinking about it. It's not a presentation of academic papers or corporate promotion. It combines the knowledge and evidence of academics with the experience and insights of practitioners. So what's the purpose of a conference on corporate purpose? Well, one objective is to determine what is a corporate purpose. Corporate promotion in the guise of corporate purpose is clearly rampant. How does one stop that and determine what is a meaningful purpose? Well, the British Academy programme on the future of the corporation suggested that a corporate purpose is producing profitable solutions for the problems of people and planet, not profiting from producing problems for either. And that requires companies to specify the problems they are there to solve, to establish how they'll credibly commit to solving them, how they ensure they are solved, and how they demonstrate that they're profiting from solving, not producing problems. Is this the basis of a meaningful corporate purpose? If so, who should determine what it is in a particular firm and how it should be implemented, financed, enforced, and measured? And this raises 5 sets of issues that we're going to address in the conference. First, how should the boards of directors and corporate leaders determine their corporate purpose? How do they implement it and ensure it's delivered? Second, what is the significance of the ownership of a firm in determining and overseeing its purpose? Are some ownership structures better suited to doing this than others? Families, firms, foundations, employees, or institutional investors? Third, what's the role of financial markets, pension funds, asset management firms, active investors in promoting corporate purpose? What's the relation of this to sustainable finance? Fourth, what function can and should the law play in assisting companies with committing to their corporate purposes, holding directors to account, and regulating corporate purposes? Finally, how should one measure corporate purpose? How can one assess the extent to which companies are producing solutions or problems? What's the relation of this to measuring ESG? Well, this should be a lively and informative debate. To save time, there'll be no introduction of panel members at the start of the sessions. You can read their institutional associations in the program. We are hoping that the discussions will lay the foundations for future research on corporate purpose and responsible capitalism in ECGI. So please do contribute to the discussions, but please keep your interventions and questions brief and to the point. At the end of each session, we ask you please to feedback on your mobile phones the main messages and insights you've taken away from each of the sessions using either hashtag ECGI events or tag at ECGI.org. And I think there's supposed to be a slide that's coming up reminding you to do that periodically during the conference. Steen and I will summarize your observations and our thoughts on the sessions and next steps at the end of the conference. And George Dallas is also very kindly keeping a written record of the discussions and will make available a summary of that after the conference. So with that, I'll turn to the chair of the first session, Jordi Canals, to take the conference forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colin, for this introduction. Thank you very much, Steen, for organizing, helping organize this conference here. It's a great honor to have you all here, and especially to have the 3 speakers, Claudine Gartenberg, Ruth Aguilera, and Juvencio Maeztu. We're going to talk about leading, managing, and governing corporate purpose from the evidence that we have available through Claudine's contribution, from the perspective of how purpose can be integrated deeper into the governance, also taking into account different institutional settings. This is what Ruth is going to do. And then Juvencio is going to lead us to the world of purpose in the real world of a large company. So thank you very much for being with us. And Claudine, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Is there a clicker for the slides? Oh. Wonderful. Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Claudine Gartenberg. I am at Wharton at the University of Pennsylvania. Thank you so much to Colin, Steen, and Jordi for inviting me to present to you today. So I've been doing research on purpose for about 10 years now. And today I'm going to share the highlights of what we've been finding over that decade-long research program. So the beginning part of this is going to be very similar to what Colin just said. The motivation for this research is dialogue and discussion on purpose has skyrocketed over the past 2 decades, 3 decades or so, and it's increasingly part of the conversation. It's part of the conversation for investors, it's part of the conversation for boards, and it's one of the primary things that employees look at when they look to join companies. And so what do we know about it? Well, there's one problem with this increase in popularity and purpose, which is that companies know this. And so what we've been seeing recently is what Colin alluded to, which is that there's this incredible pooling that's going on of potentially some companies are truly invested in pursuing a meaningful purpose, but there's a lot of, I'm going to steal a term that Colin used several years ago that has stuck with me. There's a lot of twaddle out there on purpose, which I love to say, although I can't say it with a British accent. So there's just a lot of nonsense. So this is one of my favorite management discussion and analysis descriptions of their business, which is one of my favorite punching bags, although there's many more to choose from. This is from WeWork, and when they discuss what their purpose is, we are a community company committed to maximum global impact. Our mission is to elevate the world's consciousness. It's just a word salad of nothing. And so how do you actually know when purpose is real and what it does for businesses and how it allows them to compete? And that's what we're interested in studying within this research program. Now, what this has done is led to quite a polarized debate on purpose. So on the one hand, you have real proponents of this idea, and this is one proponent, but there's others. I've counted myself in this camp as well, viewing that purpose and profits go together. Purpose is the means for which profits should be realized for companies. This is a quote from Larry Fink. Profits are in no ways inconsistent with purpose. In fact, they're inextricably linked. So you have people that are true proponents of the idea of purpose, and then you have people that are much more skeptical on the other side, thinking that this is just a new form of managerialism. You obscure your actions in this cloak of meaning-rich talk, and really what you're doing is no good for anybody except for yourself. So that's what we've been studying. A couple definitional boundaries here that I'll put forward. This is the way we've been defining purpose. This won't be the way everybody in today's room defines purpose, but I'll be very clear with how we think about it. So when we think about purpose, we think of it very similar to Colin and what this British initiative discussed, which is what is the meaning of a company's work beyond financial measures of performance. So why are the companies engaging in what they're doing? This is generally what CEOs mean when they talk about their corporate purpose. What it is not is the following when we talk about it. So corporate purpose is not the objective function of what the corporate form is itself. So some people, when they talk about purpose, think, what are corporations to do in society? What are the fiduciary responsibilities? Who do they serve? That's not how we think about it. We think about it from a managerial perspective. It's not isomorphic to ESG or CSR. Those may be related, but may not be related. Not isomorphic to stakeholder orientation, may be related to social surplus, but that's an empirical question. And so this is the definition that we take for our research program. So what does purpose do? So the meaning of a firm's work, what it allows is this idea of shared meaning of what your joint collective endeavor is. And so as we know from social sciences ranging back 100 years, this is Viktor Frankl. He's one social scientist that talked about this. We are meaning motivated beings. We care that our jobs that our work during the day have an impact. We care of what we do. And so the need for meaning is one of the motive force of us as animals. And so we know that. We also know that from lab studies. And so there's studies in marketing, there's studies in organizational behavior, some of them done in my department at Wharton. I won't go into each of these here, but they show that you keep financial incentives exactly the same, you keep job design the same, you keep everything else identical, but you have one job that is more meaningful. You inject a sort of a meaning-rich valence to the job, and people work harder. They care more about their job. So we know this works on a lab setting, but what is the large-scale evidence on purpose out there? And so that's what we've been doing for the past 10 years. We have an empirical program on corporate purpose. It's very hard to do. There's very limited large sample research on purpose, and there's reasons for that. From an academic perspective, one reason is definitions are blurry. A big reason is measurement, which I guess we'll have a session on that later today. And the third is what's called identification. How do you know that what purpose is doing versus purpose just reflects something else about an organization? So our research program tries to make headway on the measurement side of things. And so how do we do that? We do this through, there's 4 studies that we've done. I'll talk about 3 of these today. And so how do you measure purpose? So firstly, I'll start with how we don't measure purpose. And part of this is I'm a cynic, and so I find it hard to trust what leadership says. Apologies to anybody here who's in leadership. But we don't measure purpose by trusting corporate purpose statements. Those are crafted. Those have been through multiple iterations. It's very hard to tell them apart. We don't trust what CEOs say because some CEOs are very good at language and others are not. And so we don't trust what CEOs say, and we don't trust public filings, MD&As, other discussions of management. So we don't trust any of that. What we do trust is employees. And so what we say is that purpose, if it's done correctly, should manifest through a sense of meaningfulness at the employee level. And so we use the aggregated beliefs that employees have in the meaningfulness of their jobs as a credible signal that those companies have actually instantiated a meaningful purpose. And so we don't know what the purpose is, we can't measure the purpose directly, but we follow the Bob Marley dictum that you can fool employees some of the time, but you can't fool all the employees all of the time. And so if the employees on average believe their jobs are meaningful, then those companies have done something from a purpose perspective. So we measure the variation at the employee level to infer purpose at the organizational level. So our first paper here asks this, age-old question: is it purpose and profits? And do we have evidence of that? And so what we've done here is we create this measure of purpose at the employee level. And I won't go into the details of that measure. You can read the paper. But essentially what we find here, the first finding that we have here is that purpose falls down the organization. So for those of you that are running organizations, you probably know this. Executives have a very high sense of purpose, and that falls as you go further down the hierarchy. But the second thing we find is that purpose actually comes in 2 forms when we run a factor analysis on these questions. One is this idea of purpose camaraderie. So I have a sense of purpose in the company, and I feel like there's a family atmosphere here where it's a team, right? We all identify with the organization, we feel teamwork. And the second is this idea of purpose clarity, which is that our jobs have meaning, we impact the community, and we know what we're doing and we know where we're going. And these are different companies have different strengths across these. Companies sort into one or the other. And what we find importantly is that there's no relationship between just pure sense of purpose and any financial performance. There's no relationship between purpose camaraderie and any measures of financial performance, but there is a relationship between this idea of measure of purpose clarity, and they have to go together. It can't just be clarity on its own, it can't just be purpose on its own, but that bundle of beliefs correlates with financial performance. And so what we find here, the x-axis here is low versus high purpose, and the y-axis here is various measures of financial performance. And there's no correlation between purpose camaraderie and performance, but there is a strong correlation between purpose clarity and financial performance. And so it leads to higher return on assets, higher enterprise growth rate, higher annual abnormal returns. And the paper goes into a discussion of causality versus correlation. We make an argument through a range of tests that this is causal. The second finding on this paper is that this link is driven entirely by the middle ranks of the organization. So if the executives feel a strong sense of purpose, actually sometimes that's negatively correlated with financial performance. But if the middle layers feel that, if the middle layers feel like their work is meaningful, that actually correlates with strong financial performance. So these are the core findings of this first paper. There's no connection between proclaimed purpose and performance. That means purpose statements, what CEOs say. But there is a connection between purpose and performance, but it must be believed by the employees of the organization. It must be bundled with this idea of clarity. The employees need to know where the organization is doing and what it's doing to accomplish its goals. It must be particularly felt by the middle layers of the organization, and it appears to be causal, at least in part. The second paper then asks, well, why do we see differences in in purpose across organizations. Why do we see such large variations? And here we look at corporate ownership, who the owners of these companies are, whether they're publicly held or privately traded, and the nature of the owners within each of those groups. And so here we actually have a larger sample here, 1.5 million employees across 1,100 US organizations. All of this is American data, and 11 years. And what we find here is that the sense of purpose is lower in public companies versus privately held companies, and lower in private equity held companies versus private companies. So it's systematically lower in those two classes of companies relative to sort of pure private firms. And that's driven by the lower ranks. So what you see, this is a graph here. This is the private firm baseline, private firm baseline. These are the different types of owners here. These are the hierarchical layers of the organization. So these are executives all the way through hourly employees. There's no difference in the sense of purpose between public and private firms at the high level of the organization, but that gap increases as you go further down. So within private firms, the sense of purpose is actually very similar between hourly employees and executives, but it's very large in publicly traded firms. What we find here is that appears to be explained by the temporal horizon of the owners. So here we look at this x-axis here is the degree of hedge fund ownership of a firm. Actually, I shouldn't say temporal horizon. We talk about sort of active external owners here. So this is the degree that the outstanding equity is controlled by hedge funds, and this is the sense of purpose. The larger the degree of hedge fund ownership, the lower the purpose is inside the company. This here is the temporal horizon. So this is the proportion of dedicated minus transient investors and sense of purpose. The longer the time horizon, the more dedicated investors, the higher the sense of purpose inside organizations. This is correlated with different corporate choices that these companies engage in. So these companies with these active external owners, they hire more outsider CEOs. They engage in more inorganic corporate development, more M&A. And they have very different compensation structures for their executives. So higher CEO to median pay gap, but also different metrics. We use incentive lab data and show that they're incentivized less on cost and margin and more on growth and intangibles. And so this is one graph from this paper. This shows the CEO employee pay gap. The higher it is, the lower the sense of purpose inside these firms. And again, we consider this treatment versus sorting question. Are these owners just sorting into different kinds of firms? And we argue that it's not entirely driven by that. It appears to be some type of ownership effect on these companies. And then the last paper I will talk about, this just goes through what we find here. The last paper I'll talk about is this age-old question of purpose and profits, or purpose or profits. So our first paper, we find a positive relationship between purpose and profits. This paper argues that that relationship is not universal, that there are contexts where they go together, and there are contexts which they appear to go apart from each other, that you have to trade them off from each other. And this paper asks the question, when do you have to trade these off from each other? And so what we find here is that there are some industries where purpose and profits appear to go together. So this is healthcare, and you can see here, here's purpose, here's return on assets, and they're complements. The higher the purpose, the higher the profits. Here's another industry, this is financial services. The higher the purpose, the lower the profits. So it depends on the industry that you're in. And this also looks at firms. So again, we found a positive average relationship between purpose and profits. But if you look across companies, that's only true for a small amount, or not a small amount, but a small majority of those companies. So here we force rank the companies. This is anything above this line, purpose and profits are complements. Anything below this line, they go apart from each other. And you can see here, for about 55% of the companies in the sample, they appear to go together, but for 45%, they either are unrelated or they go apart from each other. That's true for industries as well. So I showed you, again, here's the line. Anything below the line, they go apart from each other. Anything above the line, they go together. So here's financial services that I showed before. Here's healthcare, which I showed here. And you can see here, depending on the industry, sometimes they go together, sometimes they go apart. What determines whether they go together or go apart? So we found two factors. One is the degree to which these companies rely on intangibles. So think R&D, think creativity, innovativeness. The more companies rely on intangible assets for profits, the more purpose and profits go together. The less that you rely on R&D, if you have a zero R&D budget, they tend to be substitutes. They tend to go apart. You need to choose one or the other, or companies are choosing one or the other. The other contingency that we identified is owner commitment. So the longer horizon your owners are, purpose and profits go together. For companies with short-term horizons, purpose and profits go apart. These are all correlations, but given the other two studies, there's likely a treatment effect buried in here. So I'll skip through here. So purpose and profits appear on average to be complements. They go together, purpose and profits. However, the general statement of purpose and profits are inextricably linked appears to be true in some but not all settings. And this is true even with the same operationalization of purpose. The same measure of purpose, the same data is true in some settings but not true in others. So in closing, 3 big messages. First, corporations can pursue both purpose and profits in a for-profit setting, but it requires both purpose and clarity bundled together, and it has to be believed by the middle ranks of the organization. It has to be something that is successfully instantiated within companies, not just proclaimed at the top. Number 2, ownership and governance matter. So this purpose is weaker in companies with active external owners, and that appears to be at least partly a treatment effect. And then the last message from this work is that purpose and profits is not a universal truth. There are settings where they go together. There are settings where they go apart. Whether that's technically imposed by the nature of what the industry is, or whether that's a choice that can be affected, that we can't say that much about. But we do know, just descriptively, that it is not universally true today. That is all I have. I look forward to the discussion and to speaking more during breaks. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Claudine, for this excellent summary of your fantastic research. I think it's very good to start the conference with some empirical evidence, because we can refer to it throughout the different sessions. And now we go to Ruth Aguilera and her perspective on those results, but also on how to integrate purpose in corporate governance. Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you all. My name is Ruth Aguilera. I come from Northeastern University, and thanks to ECGI and the Center for Corporate Governance at CBS for having me here. So my role is to extend and continue Claudine's fantastic empirical work, and then set the stage for Juvencio's presentation that he's going to zoom into the example of one corporation. So that's my agenda, and I will have 3 remarks, one on purpose for whom, another one on institutional differences, and the last one on the role of corporate governance, ECGI, so the role on corporate governance on this debate on corporate purpose. So yesterday we had a great, fruitful day with the Young Scholars Workshop. And part of the day we spent discussing what is corporate purpose, how do we measure it, does it exist, will it exist tomorrow, etc. So just to stir the pot a little bit, I wanted to share a couple of definitions that we worked with yesterday. The first one is from CEO, Best Buy CEO, Herbert Jolles, and basically he sees, this is a HBR paper and book, he sees corporate purpose at the intersection of 4 circles, what the world needs, what the company is uniquely good at, how the company can create economic value, and finally, what people at the company are passionate about. I would say that Claudine's work really fits into this green bubble, and it's a very complex and difficult work and to measure and to get at. So that's like a key part to look at that bubble. There are a lot of definitions. The other one is the one that Colin just told us very quickly this morning, and I just want to have it here, you know, just to kind of ground it for the discussions. It's one of the accepted definitions. It's creative and concise. And the purpose of business is to produce profitable solutions to the problems of people and planet. And in the process, so that's very important that it's a process, in the process, it produces profits. I'm just going to plug in that Colin has a book coming up, Capitalism and Crisis, How to Fix It, coming up to 2024. All right, so just kind of another way to look at one of the first slides that Claudine had. These are the S&P 500 since 2007, and looking at their website, this is from a dissertation of a student of mine at Illinois, looking at in the websites of these companies doing web scrubbing, how, which ones do state some pro-social goals, like explicit pro-social goals. So we see that it has really increased, right? Okay, so let me just, a couple of comments, just kind of like to summarize Claudine's excellent empirical work. So, Claudine really focused, and the team that she works with, they focus on capturing employee sense of corporate purpose. That is where they zoom in, that green part, and it is a very important contribution to really just shed light into, this part of the organization that is an important part. She explores the very complex relationship between profit and purpose, and that's kind of like the quintessential last, question. And I really like one thing that maybe she didn't emphasize as much here, which is, related to some inequalities within the firm and how employees perceive purpose inequality that she measures. She measures with CEO compensation inequalities or gaps and different levels within the organizational hierarchy. So she brings in a little bit of organizational design here, and basically, comes up with the conclusion that low purpose is driven by lower and middle rank employees. All right. I really like, and I'm sure you all enjoyed, how Claudine goes then into the contingencies of this relationship between purpose and profits. And she's looking at public versus private firms. She looks at when this relationship is complementary, when you need a lot of R&D, a lot of innovation, whereas when this relationship is more a substitute relationship across different industries. She looks at the role of owners, and we'll come back to it. I'll come back to the role of owners in a minute, and then we'll have a panel on it. And these are an old question in law and finance regarding the transient owners versus committed owners and their role in shaping corporate purpose, and at the compensation scheme, at the incentives, and how these are related to the sense of purpose. So things that, for future work, things that could be, as we move forward in this research, in this conversation, is that the work of Claudine looks at, it's a little bit one-sided in the sense that she's looking at the employee's sense of meaning, sense of purpose within the corporation. And as I was saying, I have this doctoral student who is continuing this work, and she looks at the role at the voice of employees, so through Glassdoor, but she also looks at how that, whether that is congruent or not with what the company, what the organizations state. So in a way, just to create a little bit of debate here, I disagree a little bit with Claudine's statement that the CEO's messages, what the organizations put out there is not relevant, because I think that is that needs to be checked within how the organizational members fit. So that's like one layer. And therefore, it is important to look at these both sides in a dyadic way. What the firm leadership states, what do the boards think, what's in the 10K statements, that, etc. That's one part. And then the second part, so, is the boards. What is the role of the boards? What are the role, etc. So this is, okay. So let me move to 3 remarks that I will make. I'll spend less time in the last one. And this is based on a paper that just came out in a strategy organization. And it's a special issue that Claudine has a paper in there as well. It's a special issue on corporate purpose, edited by William Ocasio, Matthew Kratz, and David Chandler. So these are all management organizational theory professors. So the first question that I have is corporate purpose for whom? And here I'm speaking a little bit, preaching to the choir, but I just want to remind us, how does ownership looks like today, right? So the first thing to remember, it's very important. The first thing to remember is that we have institutional shareholders have been on the rise, and this is data from the OECD countries. So institutional investors are the major owners in publicly traded firms. But so that's OECD. If we look at all the different regions in the world, not in the entire world is institutional investors. We see in the US and Europe, yes. Yet in China, we still have a lot of state ownership. And in the emerging market, Asia, private corporation is basically family firms, right? So a big part of our world is not dominated by institutional investors, it's dominated by state-owned firms and family firms, and that will definitely have an effect on corporate purpose. And not only that they are predominant, but these are majority owners, right? Like they are majority owners and very concentrated ownership. The ownership, as our colleagues here, Aznar and colleagues from IESE and other people have studied, the ownership, among institutional investors and the concentrated ownership has really bundled around the big three, okay? And here, and I think, and I will get back to this, but the big three asset managers have a big role in setting the agenda, leading, and then it gets diffused and trickle down through the other investors on, what is purpose, what are the pro-social goals, etc. And we have here this, we know that every year these big three are becoming more vocal, and they're also becoming more prominent, and they are important. So here I'm just citing the work of our colleague who is here in the audience. We know, for instance, that big three are effectively pushing firms to decrease emissions from this GFE paper. So they have a role in shaping. So why do we care about owners? Because they definitely have a role in shaping boards, right? And they have a voice. They have a voice because they vote and they shape the boards. And we know that, and this is part of the backlash that we see in ESG. And here I wanted to call your attention to, yes, we have more proposals, but fewer proposals are getting passed, right? So we are in the middle. We are actually, as opposed to last year when we were in this conference, this year we are really in the middle of a backlash, of a polarization on the purpose, ESG, etc. We see a lot less ESG proposals passing, especially ENS. The G is quite stable, passing during the annual shareholder meetings. Okay, let me turn to my second point. My second point is about the role of institutions, and when institutions I also mean culture, in modern capitalism. And this is a capitalism that is, we have climate risk, we have deglobalization, we have a digitalized world, we have geopolitics. It's a very complex world, very, very complex world. And to explain that world, I'd like to refer to the opening paper of this special issue in Strategy Organization. And this paper uses this theory in organizational theory, which is institutional logics by Ocasio and Thornton. And in the institutional logics, they think of, they kind of divide how the capitalism looks like over time, right? So they look at the corporate purpose, the sources of power within the corporation, the basis for firm strategy, what is the focus of attention, and some examples. So we're looking at the US, and I just want to point to you here, this exercise, sharing this with you, is to indicate the evolution. Institutions are quite sticky, but there is an evolution, obviously, right? So industrial capitalism, corporate purpose, rapid economic growth, sources of power, the owner was typically the director, the basis of a strategy, economies of scale, the focus of attention, productive size, and an example, Carnegie Steel. Fast forward, we're moving on, managerial capitalism. There's a lot written in law and finance, in management, about managerial capitalism. The corporate purpose was economic prosperity. The sources of power, managerial hierarchy. The basis of a strategy, diversification. That's the big era of the diversification. The focus of attention, growing sales. An example is General Motors, okay? The Sloan School. something that we all know a lot and we have all written a lot about, shareholder capitalism. The next stage, corporate purpose, economic freedom, market efficiencies. Sources of power, institutional investors. Here's the rise of institutional investors, the rise of the concentration. Basis for a strategy, competitive advantage. Porter, Jensen, they go together. Focus of attention, market valuation, an example, General Motors, Jack Welch. And finally, today, modern capitalism, sustainable capitalism, accountable capitalism, the corporate purpose, sustainable prosperity for all without hurting planet and people. Sources of power, strategic leadership. We have new sources of power. Basis of a strategy, value proposition. Focus of attention, value creation, but here I would add, from my point of view, another focus of attention is value distribution. Once you have created the value, how do you distribute it within the corporation, outside the corporation, how do you distribute it? An example, Unilever. Okay, so there are a lot, so here's the US, I just did an evolution of the US, but we are in Europe, we're in Denmark, there are a lot of cross-national institutional differences, cultural differences, and this could be between coordinated and liberal markets, tight versus loose cultures, hard, soft law, societal expectations of what corporations, what managers, what employees are supposed to do, etc. This is an example, I just pick up this, it's quite controversial, but the example of Glencore to kind of shed light on that, right? Glencore chief Nagel says, European investors are too focused on ESG. In Europe, and returns are sometimes put second or third in the list. That's the concern for all of us, okay? So I've written quite extensively about the differences between the US, let's say the stakeholder model and the shareholder model, or the liberal and coordinated model, and how those differences, those institutional differences reflect on CSR, ESG, and other metrics of purpose. But today I wanted just to kind of close this point number 2. I wanted to shed light to this paper that our colleague Dan Pukniak wrote, and that is receiving tomorrow the 2023 ECGI Law Prize paper. And so tomorrow you'll get to hear about it. This paper is entitled, No Need for Asia to be Woke, Contextualizing Anglo-America's Discovery of Corporate Purpose. This is a great paper, and congratulations, Dan. I think whoever was in the committee selected a very good paper. Why do I like this paper? Because he says in his paper, Anglo-America's recent discovery that corporations have stakeholders, other than shareholders, and purposes other than maximizing shareholder value is hailed as a corporate governance solution that can deliver global prosperity. However, his article demonstrates that long before Anglo-America's discovery of corporate purpose, Asia was already awake to it. So what does he find? He shows very convincingly that different, and we know a lot about Europe and the differences, but I wanted to point here, zoom out to Asia, because Dan points out that different jurisdictions have different understanding of the purpose that corporations should serve. And there is not one size fits all. And basically, he shows us how China has a common prosperity, Japan has company community, India has a stakeholderism, and Singapore has profit making, not maximizing, profit making, state-owned and family firms, and that there are really different realities depending on the jurisdiction, okay? So moving to my last point, and this is going to be very short, I hope today we're able to think a little bit more about how corporate governance can help materialize, can help bring down to an implementation level what corporate purpose is. So the first question that we have to ask ourselves, this comes from yesterday's Young Scholars, is what, I'm citing Colin here, is what are we trying to achieve? So that's the 101 strategy question. Where are you going? So who develops the corporate purpose? How do owners are key in my view, influence purpose? What are the rights of different owners across jurisprudences? What are the power relations within the firm? Those are defined, obviously, by corporate governance, the power between the different agents within the organization. What is the purpose of boards? And Jordi Canals has an excellent book talking about the long-term strategic view of boards and how boards can contribute to corporate purpose. What is the relationship, and Claudine touched quite a bit on this, what is the relationship between purpose and compensation schemes, time horizons, and corporate strategies, merger and acquisitions, divestitures, etc. And how we can strengthen purpose using corporate governance tools such as accountability and trust building. So I think, and I agree here with some of the colleagues here in the room today, that business can play a big role in helping solve big problems. And just to close up with this, Glencore, and this is a big saga of Glencore, but acting and voting consistent with corporate purpose, like BlackRock did, which is the third largest shareholder in Glencore, matters, right? So this is why. So that's it. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ruth, for this excellent discussion on some things related with the institutional uniqueness of purpose around the world, also the role of owners, and also the role of boards and management in making purpose more than just a statement, and also something that is really influential in the life of a company and eventually in the life of society. And the third speaker, Juvencio Maeztu, will help bring us to the real world of a large company, Ingka, Ikea. This is a company, as you know very well, that has been led by a sense of purpose for many years. And I have had the privilege of getting to know the company a bit better for the past 10 years. And Juvencio and his team have been really making a huge effort trying to connect purpose and the values implicit in the notion of purpose that Ingka Ikea has, and integrating them into governance and management. So, Juvencio, the floor is yours, and thanks a lot for being with us today.
Thank you, Jordi, and thank you, Claudine and Ruth. Good morning. I want to talk today about three things that are connected. The first one is, how do we integrate purpose across the business? The second one is the half full glass. It's about the outcome of the things that we feel very proud of. And the third one is the half empty glass. It's the things that we have not achieved, and we need to keep working on. Before I start, I want to make a clarification. As Jordi pointed out, Ingka or Ikea. Ikea is a brand. Ingka is a company. Ingka stands for Ingvar Kamprad, the founder of Ikea. And we are a group. Ingka Holding is a group of three group of companies. Ikea, the Ikea you know. The second one is Ingka Center, where we operate, used to be shopping center. We are transforming to meeting places in many countries in the world. And the third one is an investment company, 23 billion euros, which is mainly has two objectives: to accelerate the climate transition, not only in Ikea, but also contributing to the world. And the second one is the financial resilience and the long chain of the whole group. If I start with the first block, how do we integrate purpose across the business? My main message here is that there is no silver bullet. It's the whole integration that works. And for us, purpose is not charity by the size of the business. It is good business to be good business. So at the end of the day, purpose for us is business. In the way we integrate three dimensions: the business model, purpose, and financials, as the three of them has to be in the backbone of the way we do business. How do we do that? We start with the vision. It was the best gift that we got from the founder. The key vision is to create a better everyday life for the many people by making a better life at home. This is our focus in order to contribute to a better life for the many people. From there, it leads to the ownership structure. In 1982, Ingvar Kamprad donated Ikea to the foundation. So we are owned by Ingka, Stichting Ingka Foundation, which is based in the Netherlands, not for tax purposes, because we pay 29% corporate taxes. That for a global company, you can agree with me, is quite high. It's because the foundation setup is extremely rigid, because he was determining Ikea to be eternal, because achieving the vision is a very long journey. So there is €0 that goes to the private pocket of any shareholder. 85% remains in the company, we finance ourselves, and 15% are dividends that go to the foundation for the charitable purposes. So we do purpose in the way we do business, and there is a charity activity in the way that IKEA Foundation do the job. So we have the vision, we have the structure, the ownership. The next one we missed years ago. And then we started to work 4 years ago. We decided 4 years ago, it was just before COVID, so it came just on time. We didn't know about COVID, but it was just on time. We asked, how do we know if we are achieving our vision? We know if we achieve our business goals, but we don't know how close we are to our vision. And we developed our model in order to clarify what performance is about in the company. And performance for us is made of 4 dimensions. It's better homes for customers, it's better planet for all, it's better life for people, and it's better company for the long term. So better home for customer, this is a more commercial dimension. Because you could argue that the way we do business, it's actually contribute to a better life. So this has to be also evaluated, the commercial part, from the purpose point of view. There's purpose in the business model. The second one is better planet for all, where this is not only the fully decarbonization of IKEA, but also contributing to the climate in the world. We said it's not enough that we become net zero. We have to also contribute to the world, and I will explain later. The third one, better life for people. Who are people? It's our co-worker, 200,000 colleagues all over the world, direct. It's the supply chain, where we have millions of people working for the IKEA supply chain. And the third one is the communities we touch. So somehow we said these are the 3 dimensions how we have to measure in our contribution to the social dimension. The fourth one is better company for the long term. Is the financial dimension, not to reward the shareholder, but is to build the whole financial resilience for the long term of the company. We developed that, and it was one of the things that fly quickly in the whole organization, because now every leader and every co-worker has goals in the performance evaluation about these 4 topics. From there, we developed the strategies, and these are the strategies that we have, and then strategies across the business, where sustainability, of course, is called people and planet positive, because it's not only climate, it's also the social side. And then from there, we go to the actions, and this is the toughest one, because up to now, it's theory. And it's in the actions that you are cementing or not all the strategies and all the goals that you develop. Because it's in the action where you find dilemmas. Do I save the wallet or do I save the planet? It's in the action where you find contradiction in between what you want to do and the financial returns, or what you want to do and then the consequences of this decision. And it's in the action where we immediately recognize that we have to develop the standards to take that decision. Because we cannot put leaders in the corner about saying, this is ambition from the company, but by the way, give me that money. You have to build the prerequisite to create the frame for decision to be supported. And we experienced that when we had to phase out top sellers from the company. We experienced that when we had to take decision on exiting Russia. We experienced that when we had to approve our renewable heating and cooling, 1.4 billion euros, only to reduce the CO2 from all the buildings we own in the world. And we experience that when we have to penetrate US or China or Indian markets with a model that has to be also sustainable. So you cannot keep replicating the toolbox that we have been using before. That's why this was the toughest part. And in order to go through that, it came on time because the sequence of crises from COVID to the supply chain crisis, to the war in Ukraine, to the inflation crisis, all this has tested us because this decision where we decided we have to double down now in our effort to really leapfrog in these circumstances. Because there is a temptation to go back or to wait. And if you wait, you say it's too early, too early, too early, and suddenly it's too late. That's why we decided that sustainability and climate, for example, is the new low-cost economy. Carbon is cost. Dealing with carbon will reduce costs in the company, in the short, in the long term. So this is the most interesting part, and we decided to turn dilemmas into polarities. Because in a dilemma, you are a victim. Someone is winning and someone is losing. Do I choose A or B? In a polarity, both are needed. In a dilemma, you can say profitability is an enemy of affordability. In our case, we transform into a polarity. We said the twin sister of affordability is low cost. And by working with cost, we can make IKEA more affordable for the many people. And then from there, we go to the next block, which is the whole follow-up. And here we're working massively because, of course, you follow up in the high level, but then you also have to follow up in the intermediate KPIs. And here we have, of course, a tsunami of new regulation, especially in Europe, with the new ESG requirement reporting standards. And then we decided, okay, rather than doing reporting for the sake of reporting, this is a fantastic opportunity to merge what is the requirement, but also what we want to do. And how do we find uniqueness? And how do we use the requirement, the reporting requirement, as a fantastic toolbox to keep measuring what we do. So this is the sequence of the things that we do, and it ends in the follow-up of every leader and co-worker in the company. How is it going? Half full glass. And then I will talk about the half empty glass. Half full glass is working. So I agree entirely with both of you. Purpose and profit comes together. We have had, from the brand perspective, we just got the just released Edelman Barometer. IKEA brand now is a #1 in the world, together with Lego, a Danish company. #1 in the world across media, NGOs, government, and academia. So it's the most trusted brand in the world today. From the consumer point of view, we have the all-time high in customer satisfaction. But also, we have kept, despite the unprecedented price increases in the whole society, we have kept the affordability index when it comes to compare with other competitors. In the climate side, Better Planet for All, from the baseline, we are committed to Paris Agreement, and we have, last report we have, which is published, we have decoupled growth from climate footprint. We have grown by 24% since the baseline, and we have reduced in absolute term, not in relative, by 14% in scope 1, 2, and 3, because the 3 is the challenge, so it's the 3 of them. So we have grown, but the baseline, it is even lower. We need to keep going, but we have decoupled that. The third one is the social side, the people side, where we have all-time high engagement with coworkers and the middle management, and that you referred before. And finally, from the financial point of view, even if we don't maximize profit, we cap profit in the company in order to reduce prices. we have achieved all-time high in financial as well. So it is actually working. What is the half-empty glass? Half-empty glass, we need to do much more. The IKEA vision is unlimited, and we are still very small. There are billions of people in the world who are struggling. Social inequalities is increasing, also powered by climate change. Polarization of the world is quite scary, actually, and it's forcing us as well to be true to our core values and not to be at the mercy of the situation. So we are determined more than ever to keep reducing prices and to make IKEA more affordable for the many people. We are determined to keep reducing the climate footprint because we are not done yet and we still have gaps to close. And thirdly, we need to develop more the social dimension. Even if climate is extremely important, social dimension is unspoken today, and it's more sticky and it's more difficult to grab. That's why it is in that part where we are committed to keep working on. So you could say we are half of the journey, very proud of the half-full glass, but also very determined and transparent with the half-empty glass. And finally, I think what is not said, but I think is even more important, in the world we live in, we need to develop much more and to nurture the values as a moral compass to take decisions in companies. So if you ask me what is the priority number one for me, my job is to keep nurturing the values in the organization, so the organization, the people, the many co-workers are the ones who are able to take decisions, especially in the gray zones, and to take decisions to contribute to the 4 dimensions of the value creation goals. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Juvencio, for this overview of Ingka IKEA and how you deal with purpose and how you try to integrate purpose into strategy, business model, and different corporate policies. Well, I think we've had 3 excellent presentations. We have a lot of food for thought, many ideas. So now the floor is yours. Questions for each one of the speakers will be really welcome. If you can just briefly introduce yourself when you ask. Is there a mic here? Okay, Katharina is going to. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for this thought-provoking presentations. My name is Sylvie Rohr. I'm a research associate from the University of Hamburg, and I really enjoyed the discussion. So I have basically 3 questions, 2 for Claudine and 1 for Ruth. The first one to Claudine is, when does a company have a corporate purpose? Because I believe there's a difference when we talk about how profit is being earned and how do we use profit. And that also impacts the data that we collect and the insights we draw on that. And the second question is, do you have any data about how often do companies actually change their purposes? And the last question is to Ruth. My question is, how do we prevent that corporate purpose is used to nudge employees? Thank you so much, and I'm greatly looking forward to the rest of the discussion.
Okay, fantastic questions. So I'll give you the answer that I can give you backed up by the data that we have, and then I'll give you some opinions. And I'm sure other people in this room have sort of equally well-founded and interesting opinions on this question. So in terms of how we know when companies have purpose, so in our view, this is a little bit related to the ending point that Ruth had, which is that our data, we don't opine on that, right? We don't know when or how companies are able to effectively instantiate those purposes. What we do know from our work is when we, our view of when they've done that and when they've had a credible, sort of signal of that through whether the employees feel like that. And so what we say in our papers is we take a stand to say that people will not feel meaning if the sole purpose is let's make a ton of money for some principle for whom we're agents for. That flies in the face of human psychology, it flies in the face of financial theory, it flies in the face of agency theory. So there's something else that's going on. and it's enabled by the governance and ownership structures. I think the British Society that Colin mentioned earlier has done excellent work on what these, the types of purposes that companies engage in. So there's pro-social purposes, there's purposes for excellence, there's purposes for exploration, there's other purposes that can motivate people, and the same purposes that motivate me might not be the same ones that motivate you, but that different companies articulate them is very hard to measure. In terms of how companies change their purposes, again, we don't measure content, we measure strength. And so we have no data on that. I think, when you talk about the next sort of frontier of research that we're embarking on, we're actually trying to embark on measuring the content of purpose, which is very, very hard to do. And so stay tuned. Anecdotally, when you talk to business leaders, purposes tend not to change that often, because one thing which is true, and we can see this in our data, is you can't use them instrumentally, right? So the minute that employees feel like they're being used in order to make profits, then the credibility of purpose gets destroyed. And so when you speak to business leaders, the ones that are able to effectively instantiate a meaningful purpose, those are ones for whom the purpose guides them. They don't guide the purpose in any kind of instrumental way. But that's something that I think is, from an empirical standpoint, there needs to be much more research and evidence on.
Okay, thank you for the question. So the question that was asked is, how do we prevent that that corporate purpose is used to nudge employees? So I think in part the response Claudine just told us that, there is a lot of research in social psychology that shows that if employees are used instrumentally, it will backfire. So that would be one answer. But it also depends on the type of purpose. Steen Thomsen yesterday presented his paper on looking at the 600 Euronext companies, and he classifies the types of purpose and relates it to firm outcomes. So I think that's an interesting way to get more granular. But more generally, from a strategic point of view, I think it goes back, and I'll turn it to Juvencio because he can tell us how they do that at Ikea. It turns out, it kind of goes back to what are the values? What are the values that the leadership, and in my slide I show strategic leadership, what are the values that the leadership is embedding in the company? Are those values internalized? And then, are there the right processes? Are there effective governance and leadership structures to monitor and hold accountable and have the transparency for that to be effective? But let me turn it to Juvencio because he can talk about how do they do that at IKEA.
Thank you, Ruth. It's a good question, actually. I would say three things to simplify. One is exactly what, Ruth, you are saying, is the values, but it's not the values of the top leaders, it's the mechanism to recruit by values. And it's not only to recruit people that can fit the company values, but it's people that stand for things. So you are actually recruiting the people that are very deep in values to challenge you as a company. The second one is to have a strong, not only policies, that plans, concrete plans for equality, diversity, and inclusion. Diversity is easy, equality is difficult, but inclusion is really tough. And it's only when you work with inclusion that you are allowing people to express, and you are allowing people to influence and not to be silenced. And to have plans on inclusion, not only on diversity and equality, is key. And the third one, I would say, is be extremely clear on the half-empty glass. This is what I keep talking in the company on a permanent basis of the half-empty glass. Because it's in the half-empty glass where you build credibility. Because if you are overly proud of the half-full glass, you can end up in denial. So I would say I'm simplifying these three things.
Thank you. Francesco?
Hi. Well, first of all, thank you for the excellent panel, Jordi. I am Francesco Agnarchirafi, and I'm on the International Advisory Board of IESE, and have a portfolio of private and non-for-profit board memberships. My question is the following, and by the way, Juvencio, thank you for leading, because your group is really leading the front and is admired by a lot of corporates and a lot of non-for-profits. My question is the following. It seems to me that profits, which is being referred in most of the research document and the presentations, it's really a lagging indicator of performance, why purpose, for me, is a leading indicator of future value creation. And so by linking, let's say, purpose, which is future-oriented, to profits today, which is the results of all the decisions you've taken, maybe even when you did not, as a company, had a purpose, my question is, I would like to get your reflection on my view of seeing these two dimensions. One is future focus and the other one is historically focused, which is profits today.
So I could not agree more. In the papers, we look at a variety of future measures as well. So we look at enterprise growth rate, we look at future stock returns, we look at future profits. So the profit measures that I showed you are 2 years in the future for current purpose. And just conceptually, I think you're absolutely right? So if you're asking purpose and profits, if it's a lagging measure, then you could think about purpose as sort of a luxury good, right? You're doing really well, so now you can invest in feeling good about yourself. And that's what you don't want. And this sort of is very similar to what you just said of talking about the glass half full. You want purpose to be a motivator to pull you forward. And so in our papers, we try to do exactly that. Thank you for clarifying.
I would just add that profits is it's a process, and it's broader than financial profits. Obviously, it's like related to non-financial performance such as inclusion and other, retention, etc. So yeah, I agree with you. That's a good way to think about it.
Very good. We have time for one final question. I don't know if I think I have the mic there. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah. I'm wrestling with, in this session, but often with sessions on purpose and governance generally, I'm always wrestling with, appearance over substance. That wrestle I often feel as a kind of contest between skepticism and cynicism. So I like to be skeptical. I think it's part of our role as researchers, for example, those of us who are involved, to be skeptical. But I don't like to be cynical. And to bring to the point this session, I'm trying to balance two views. I think Claudine, with her work, gave us the message, look, if we want to understand purpose, we haven't really paid attention. We've paid attention, but we've not relied on corporate statements, filings, CEO statements, in a sense. So that's a kind of a skepticism. I think that's fine. Yet Ruth pointed out, that her colleagues are identifying that websites and the attention to purpose is going through the roof. And we have you, Juvencio, giving a great talk as a senior figure, managerial figure, CFO, CEO within Ikea. Now, if I take Claudine's point, I wouldn't really pay much attention to what's on the Ikea website. I wouldn't pay that much attention to perhaps what you're saying. And I don't like that cynicism. I don't want to operate that view. So can you help me reconcile and help me also advise my students really about how much attention we should pay to statements on websites such as your own and other leading companies, and statements by the people in your position, because I genuinely want to pay attention to those, and I don't want to breed a cynicism about the work you do, and not personally, but I mean people in your position and the websites that you produce and operate.
It's an excellent question. I really thank you for that, because this is exactly the topic we are discussing internally. I agree entirely with you that it's too much of a nice statement all over. And that can lead to greenwashing, or that can lead to other topics. What we are trying to do, I want to move from communication done by the few for the few to communication done by the many to the many. Traditionally, in big companies, you have the spokesperson, the media training, the messaging. You are well equipped with being ready to answer questions and so on. But that is good, but this is not the way forward. The way forward for me is that the 200,000 colleagues, employees, are the ones who are talking. Because you know what? They are actually doing that. And the company, of course, you are not controlling that. So for me, how do we go that the 200,000 colleagues, employees, are the spokesperson of the company? It's a bit scary because you don't control, but it's authentic. And this is the process we are on. We did one try, it was a year ago. It was in Barcelona. We took 100 Ikea employees, co-workers. And then we said to them, okay, you should meet the big Ikea. And then we listed a lot of opportunities. Do you want to meet suppliers in Vietnam? Or women doing crafting in Varanasi? Or windmills in the Nordic Sea? Or do you want to have forests in Romania? Or do you want to have solar production? Or you want anything? We chose a lot of, and then we said, choose. And then we pay 1 week to everyone to travel and to experience that. And then the goal was only one. Do whatever you want to do in sharing what you have seen. So there was no filter on that. And it worked fantastic. The sense of purpose go very high, and we have been very transparent. Being transparent builds credibility. Nobody will accuse you for being perfect. My family is not perfect. Your family is not perfect. Nobody will accuse us for being perfect. But the people will accuse you if you are not transparent, and then if you are not keep closing the gap every year. So I can hardly agree with you. I see a future, which we are working as of now, that the many people are the spokesperson of the company.
Thank you. I think there are a few more questions. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, and I would like to pick up Colin's suggestion that if you have ideas, proposals, suggestions around this session, please send these comments through Twitter to ECGI, and I think it's going to be summarized at the end of the day. But if I may, I would like to highlight three ideas out of this panel. The first idea is that it's good that we already have available empirical evidence about purpose or some dimensions of purpose. And I think it was very good that Claudine's contributions have been, I think, very useful in understanding at least the perspective of employees, different types of employees within large organizations. So I think that this is something that we need to take into account when we discuss purpose and we discuss the implications of purpose. Also, second point, which is also an idea that Claudine highlighted and Ruth expanded, which is the role of institutions, and especially the role of ownership in promoting corporate purpose and making purpose impactful. It's not the same to have certain type of shareholders as if it were, a universal shareholder that could be useful for purpose anywhere in the world. We need to be aware of those cross-cultural differences. We need to be aware. We are aware that Europe, Asia, North America, Latin America, Africa, they are different geographical contexts, and we need to take those things into account. Otherwise, we may get stuck into some really complex obstacles to advance the understanding of purpose. And finally, Juvencio, I think, presented his own experience. Obviously, one case study, even if it's very successful, does not, make for a whole theory. But I think it's very good. We need to observe what happens in the real world and what happens with companies, specific companies, and let's try to understand how the internal mechanisms through which they try to bring purpose to real life and connect purpose with business strategy, with business model, with corporate policies, how those things integrate with values, I think is really important. So I think that having more and more companies, and I think the whole day today and tomorrow we'll see more companies actually discussing with us those ideas. I should stop here. Thank you very much, Claudine, Ruth, and Juvencio for your fantastic contributions to this panel. Thank you.